Okay, let's get started. Hi, my name is Carla, and I'm going to help you with this webinar today. And I'm joining from Cochabamba, Bolivia, and I've been a happiness engineer for more than 5 years already. And what I do is I provide customer support for people who are building their websites with WordPress.com. And I see people are actually joining us from many places. Like I was checking at the places you were writing in the chat, and people from Australia and Vancouver, Zimbabwe, and we have some people from New Mexico, Colorado, and yeah, England, and I think we have people from almost anywhere in the world, and yeah, San Diego, Scotland, San Francisco, New Jersey. So, okay, I'm going to stop there because I know we have many people from everywhere, and we have a big audience today, so that's quite exciting. And we are going to start the webinar in just a few minutes more. And we have some housekeeping notes first, and that is basically about questions. So there's an option in Zoom at the bottom for Q&A. And that's where you would want to do your questions instead of the chat option. And in Q&A, you actually have a good option to vote for that question, and it's like a sort of thumbs up icon. So if you see, for example, a question that you are also interested in, you can vote for that question, and that way that question gets sort of push up a little bit farther up so we can notice the question more easily. And in the background, I have two of my colleagues joining me. I have Tanya and Catherine, and both of them will be helping me with the questions today. And yeah, so let's get started. And I'm going to change screen. So just 1 second. Okay. So full site editing. So what is full site editing? Probably many of you who've come to the webinar today actually don't know anything about it, and you're wondering what the fuss is about. And that's really good because actually the purpose of this webinar is actually getting to know what full site editing is about, okay? So we're going to say first that is built from the same tools as the WordPress blog editor. And if you are already familiar with the blog editor, the WordPress blog editor, or Gutenberg, as some people call it, you know that working with blogs is really easy. You get all the customization options and flexibilities that probably with the previous old classic WordPress editor you didn't get. So it works. That's some kind of introduction to tell you that the full site editing features are going to be based mostly on blogs. Okay, and with blogs, you also know that you almost can build any design you want inside your posts and pages because you know that there's a blog for almost anything that you need. Now, let's imagine that everything in your site was a blog, okay? And that's actually something that you probably noticed that when you were working with blogs, you notice that you can add these blogs inside your pages and your posts, but it's limited to other areas in your site, like for example, your header area, your footer, or your theme has a sidebar, for example, or your page title, your post title. You probably notice that those usually depend on your theme, and you sometimes have some theme settings, and in your theme settings you are able to customize some of those, but you can't have the same flexibility that you usually have with blogs. So that's when full site editing comes, and full site editing brings the whole features of editing with blogs to those elements like the header and the footer, and you're able to work with blog tools that you're already familiar with. And to use full site editing, you need a blog theme. So let's talk now about blog themes. Well, blog themes are, and it sounds a little bit redundant, but they are mainly a theme made out of blocks, okay? And in this situation, your theme is just the starting point. And what does that mean? If you've reached to us before in WordPress.com support, either by email or chat, you probably realize that when you ask it about some advice about finding the best theme for you, what we probably told you was that it was very important to find a theme where you would actually get the header or the footer, or if you wanted a sidebar, with a look that mostly resemble what you wanted to achieve. So that means that you can actually, in that situation, if you were able to find a theme that had a header with a logo in the position that you wanted, you could choose a theme, but you didn't have to make that more changes. What I mean is, and I'm trying to explain, and maybe I'm just going all around the place, I'm just trying to find the right words to really explain this, is that in a blog theme, you don't have to worry about that anymore, because you choose a theme and that's your starting point. And with that theme, you get to choose the design, or you get to modify the design to whatever you want. So even though the demo in a blog theme doesn't resemble or doesn't show what you want, you will be able to transform all that look to match to the style that you are wanting to achieve. Okay, you don't need any coding skills, or you don't need to be a web designer, and with full site editing, no single line of code is required. Okay, another important thing to note right now is that full site editing can't be used with classic themes. And the explanation is because these themes, the classic themes, were designed and developed with another structure in mind. And now the new themes, the blog themes, have been designed with blocks in mind. They are made out of just blocks. That's why you can't use, or you can't convert a classic theme in order to use full site editing. You would have to change themes and select a blog theme. Okay, so how do you enable full site editing on your site? On WordPress.com, and I mean on all plans, you can activate this blog theme. You can activate full site editing by activating a blog theme on your site. And I know in a previous webinar that was only a couple of weeks ago, for example, at that point, we mentioned that you could use full site editing only on new sites unless you were on a business or e-commerce plan. But in 2 weeks, that has already changed, and we've improved that, so that's good news. And now you can use full site editing in all plans and in all existing or new sites by just switching to a blog theme. Okay, and what about a self-hosted site? And I know many people here, probably they are not hosting with us, they are not hosting with WordPress.com, and you're hosting with a different provider. In that situation, then you can use WordPress 5.9 and also activate a blog theme on your existing site. Okay, and how do you find these blog themes? Well, we've added a new way to filter them, and that's by using this filter that is called full site editing. And if you go to the theme showcase in WordPress.com, for example, and you start typing full site editing, okay, then you will be able to find this filter. There's a search option here at the top, and you actually only have to start typing full site, and you will see the filter right there, and you click on it, and you will be shown all these themes where all these blog themes where you will be able to use full site editing. Okay, okay, so we are going to take an interesting approach and on this webinar specifically, and it's one of the approaches that I suggest the most, and that's importing the content of your existing site into a new site, because with this approach, what you can do is test full site editing. You can play with it, you can experiment safely without affecting your existing site. Okay, and I'm going to share with you a demo that has been prepared by my colleague, and well, let's check the demo.
This is Have Camera Will Travel, my long-running photo blog, which I set up some time ago with a classic theme. And it was a great look at the time, but I'd like to update it and customize it, which is just not really possible with this theme. For example, I'd like to be able to resize the logo and maybe tweak the title font. I'd also just like a wider homepage overall, maybe not even have this sidebar here anymore. And that would allow me to show the featured images for my blog posts a little bit larger and really show off the photography better. I'd also like to have a section up here at the top which would allow me to feature a blog post, maybe my most recent blog post, just so visitors to my site can see my first blog post really large and really catch their eye. So to do that, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the My Sites tab at the upper left. And here under Tools in my sidebar, I'm going to go to Export. And I'm just going to choose the Export All option. We're going to give this a few minutes to run. And then when the export is successful, you can see we get this message here at the top. I'm going to go ahead and download this to my computer right now. Once we have that downloaded, I'm going to go up here to the left and I'm going to switch to my All Sites view. And I'm going to click on the link to add a new site. From here, I'm going to give my site a title. And I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. And for what we're doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and choose a free domain name for now. I do have the option down the road to get a custom domain, so for now this is good just so we can experiment. And then now it's also time to choose a design, and we have quite a few themes here, and they're all for full site editing, so any one of these you pick will load the full site editor by default. So I'm going to choose this one, which I like sort of the open feel of it, and it already displays the images really well. It's a little bit more minimal than I'm looking for, but I think it's going to be a good starting point. So let's choose that, and I do have the option to add a custom domain or e-commerce or a few other options now, but I'm just going to go ahead and skip and just start with a really simple site, and I can add those later. So free site for now, and I'm going to click Select to build the site. Once the site is ready, we're dropped into the site editor for our site, where if we wish we can actually begin customizing things, and you can see that it looks an awful lot like the demo for the theme that we were looking at, and it actually looks like we're on the live site, but as I move around and sort of hover my cursor over things, you can see that everything here I can interact with, including in the header. I have the option to interact with this area here where we might add a logo, or this area over here where we can add a navigation menu, for example. And that's when you can see that everything here in the site editor view is actually made from blocks.
Okay, let's stop here for a moment, and I'm going to change screens again. Okay. And yeah, so we're going to stop here because we want to actually review some concepts before we continue with the demo. And we're going to answer this question, how do you make a website out of blocks? And for that, we actually have to review some concepts. So let's say we start with this blank template, this blank page, and we have nothing on there. We have no structure, no content. Okay, and then we start by adding a block to the top. Okay, and then we add some more blocks inside. So we have the site logo, the site title, the tagline, and a navigation menu, navigation menu items here to the right side that you can see. And we are adding blocks inside a block. Okay, and that's what we actually called in a blog theme a header template area. So it's just a bundle of all the blocks that are contained in this big group block at the top. And this big group block at the top that is already containing all these blocks is going to be called the header template area. Okay, and we can actually do the same with another area in our website. Like, for example, we have this footer area, and that's going to be the footer template part. And we can already see that even though we don't have any content here and it's completely empty, we already have some elements here, like the element, like the header and the footer, that actually start to do the good makings of a good website. Okay, and now we add some content here, and here we have an index template. And in the index template, we can see that we have here in the middle, in between the header and the footer, we have this area where we are displaying a feed of our blog posts. Okay, so in a blog theme, the template where you are displaying a feed of your blog post is going to be called an index template, Let's check another template. And this might be useful for those who are really not interested in displaying blog posts. Maybe you don't want to have a blog area within your site, and you're probably going to use more pages. And that's when the page template comes. And when you add a new page inside your WordPress site, that's going to be the template by default, the page template. Okay, and in this page template, you can actually see that you have a header area and you have a footer area here at the bottom, and you have some content inside, and that content is going to be whatever you type inside that page. So you can start adding text and images, for example, and that content is going to be shown inside this page template. And you can use that page template for all your other pages. So you can start a new page, add a contact form, for example, and that's going to be your contact page that is going to use the same template as this one. Okay, now some themes come with special templates, like the homepage template, for example. Your theme could have a template that has a very specific design for the homepage. Here, for example, we can see we have call to action button here, and we have like a mini feed of your post here in this section. So this is only to show you that you can have other custom templates created by you inside your site. So far, we've seen a page template, an index template, and a homepage template. Now let's recap a little bit on the template parts. So what they are a group of blocks that you can use them over and over. Some are used on every page of your site. So for example, if you have a footer template part, you can use that template part across all your templates, and therefore it will show across all your site. You can use some of these templates only once or twice. You can create, for example, a sidebar template part and use that template part only in your index template, and that's not going to show anywhere else, but only on that template. And what is a page template? Basically, it's just a collection of template parts. Okay, so when do you want to edit a template part? And the answer is that you mostly want to do that when you want that change to appear site-wide. And by that, I mean that if you want that change to affect all the templates where that template part is being included, then you would edit the template part. And I'm going to show you an example because it's a little bit hard to just explain it in this way. And we have here 3 templates. Okay, so the page, the index, and the homepage template. And we can see they are using the same header template part here at the top. So since they are using the same template part, we can actually just modify the template part in order to affect all templates. So let's say we want to change this logo from a rounded one to a square one. And we only want to do that once, and then just be sure that that will affect everywhere where we are using that template part. So we edit the template part, and that's going to affect all templates because all these templates are using that header template part. Okay. When do you want to edit the template itself? And that's when you want that change to appear on that template only. And I'm going to try to explain this with an example as well. So we have 3 templates, okay? And in the index template, you can see that we are showing here a feed of our blog posts. And we also have here a section on our homepage template where we are actually showing like a mini feed of our blog post. And you could also have some other pages where you also want to show your blog post in a feed. Like that could also be a situation, maybe, I don't know, category pages, for example, but I'm not going to dive deep into that, but just like to give you an idea, like what other possible scenarios where you could also be using your feed of blog posts. Okay, so let's come back to the example. And in this specific example, we only want to change the position from the image from the left to the right. Okay, so we only want to change the position of these columns here in the index template, and we don't want that to affect the other templates. We don't want that to affect the posts that we have here in the homepage, and neither any other page where we are using a feed of posts. We only want to do that here in the index template. So we modify the index template, okay, and then that's only going to affect that template, and it won't affect at all the other templates. So we can see here, we've changed the images to the right, and that hasn't affected the other templates. Okay, so let's go back to editing our site and let's continue with the demo.
Back here on our new site, you can see we are in the site editor where we can work with blocks directly. Since I'm already considering updating an existing site, instead of working with the demo content pre-installed here, I'm going to go ahead and import the contents from my other site. So to do that, I'm going to leave the site customizer and go back to my dashboard. And then similar to what I did in the other site, I'm going to go back to Tools in my sidebar, and this time I'm going to click on the Import option. I'm going to choose WordPress to import from. And you could enter the URL of your site, but since I've already downloaded my export file, I can just go ahead and upload it to import. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's my file on my computer, and since I have both windows open, I can just drag and drop, and that starts the upload process for my import. I just need to resolve a few permissions issues, and then I can go ahead and start my import. And after you give this a little bit of time to run, it depends on the size of the export file you created on your other site. But once we're finished here, we'll have all of our contents loaded on our site. Okay, and now our import is complete. From here, I'm going to go into my post section of my dashboard. And you can see I've got a couple sample posts here from the theme when we started. So I'm just going to go ahead and move those to the trash quickly, just so we're working with the blog posts from the other site. And now that we're done, let's go back to the site editor, which is here under the Appearance tab in the sidebar. And once the site editor loads, you can see that we're back on our site again with our new theme, only this time you can see that it is now with our content in place. And this is the nice thing about moving content between sites. We have all of our same content here, nothing about that has changed, but we now have it on a new theme, and we now have a starting point we can customize from. Before we get started, I want to show you a few more things about the full site editing interface. First, here in the upper left is the list view. This opens a sidebar that shows you all the blocks that are in use in this template. List view is really helpful for navigating and understanding the block structure of the template. And from here you can also easily click on blocks to select them, as well as clicking on them within the site editor directly. It can also help to collapse these sections down so your view is a little less cluttered. Here you can see that our template uses a familiar structure. It has a header template part at the top, a query loop block that is creating the blog feed for this page, and a footer template part at the bottom of the page with our website credit. Another thing I want to point out on the right is this button that reveals the Settings Sidebar. If you click on blocks in the editor view, you can see that each block has a floating toolbar with block settings. In addition to that, most blocks also have settings here in the sidebar as well, and you can see as I click on each block to the right we have even more settings to control. Also here on the right is the Styles button, which reveals a sidebar that has some site-wide design settings. It allows us to control things like the typography on our site. I actually really like the typography for this theme by default, so I'm going to leave these alone. But it also lets you do things like change the color settings, and I would like to change that. I would actually like to set a gray background instead of the cream color this theme comes with. This looks a little dark, so I think what I'm going to do is click on the swatch here and then lighten it up just a little bit. I think that's perfect. I also want to point out here at the top that you can see the name of the template we're working on. This is the index template, which displays an index or feed of blog posts from our site. Because our site is a photography blog, the index template is the default template for our homepage. Okay, now that we've covered more about the interface, let's get to work modifying our site. The first thing I wanted to do was make some changes to the header, and it would be really tempting to make the changes here in the index template, but if we do that, it'll only make the changes here, which would show on our homepage, but the other headers on the site wouldn't be changed. So first let's save our changes so far. When you save, you can see a checklist of all the changes you've made here to this template. In this case, we've just made one change, so we'll go ahead and confirm that. Now that the changes are saved, let's click on the site icon in the upper left, which shows the other sections of the editor. In this case, we want to go to Template Parts, and then locate the header template part for this theme. You can see as well this theme comes with several other template parts, such as the footer, and even a few alternate headers that we could use if we wanted to. In this case, we'll just stick with editing the header template part itself. And now that it's loaded, let's upload a logo to the header. I have one here that I've added to my media library, so I'll just click to insert it into the header. This is a little small, so I'm going to drag the size to make it a bit bigger. And also I know this block has a few extra settings, so I'm going to reveal those in the sidebar, and I'm going to choose the rounded option. I think that looks pretty good. Also, I want to make sure that we add our site tagline because it wasn't captured during the site setup process. And then the last change we want to make here is we want to make sure to set up the navigation menu. Because I imported content from another site, I can click to select a menu, and under classic menus I can see the one that I set up before when my site was using a classic theme. And now our header looks complete. I'm going to go ahead and save this template part. You can see a list of the changes that we made. We could deselect a few of these if we wanted to. For example, we could just save the change to the tagline but uncheck the change to the logo. But we're going to save it as is. And once the save is confirmed, let's go back again to our site icon and expand that so we can see the other parts of the site editor again. From here, we're going to go back to templates. And what we want to do is we want to come back to editing the index template, which, as I mentioned, is the home page for our blog. But before I do that, I wanted to point out that you can see there's a lot of other templates here as well. We have a template for pages. This is very similar to the one that I demonstrated earlier. We also have a few others for archives and for things like 404 pages. Even this one here, which dictates how single posts look. You can also see here that on this one, off camera, I've edited this one, so you can see it's been customized. It has this little blue dot next to it. And if you click on this kebab menu here, you can see that you have the option to clear customizations. So it's good to know that if you're ever customizing a template and you really just want to return to the way it was by default, you can come here into the template view and you can do that. We're going to go ahead and click on the index page and load it in the site editor. Right away you can see that the header changes that we made have been picked up here in the index template. As I mentioned, because we edited the header template part, that has the effect of editing that part for all the templates that use it. Because we used this part on the index page, the edits we made just to that part are picked up here, as well as on other templates that use this part. This header has a nice minimal look that doesn't take up much space, but I'd like for my home page specifically to have a unique header that commands a bit more attention than this. So to do that, I'm going to click on the header template part, and you can see we have this option here in the toolbar to replace it. If I click this, you can see it loads several different header options for us. These are the ones we saw listed before on the template part page. I happen to like this centered header that comes with the theme, so let's pick that. And just like with our other header, we're going to take this one and we're going to make it a rounded logo. I would also like to change the site title. I think it looks better when it's set in an italic font. The same is true of the tagline, so let's change that one as well. We're also going to click on our navigation menu, and we're going to select a menu, again selecting the same primary menu that we brought over from our other theme. Moving on from here, I'm going to expand list view again, and I'm going to click on the query loop block that is setting up the feed of blog posts on this template. What I'd like to do is I'd like to switch to a grid view, which is what my other site had, but you can see here that it's just a little too cramped, so let's change that in the settings on the right. The first thing I want to do is I want to cut down on the number of columns, so let's just display 2 columns. And this is already looking a little bit better, but you can see that the width is still really constrained here quite a bit. The reason for this is that the theme that we started with just had a single column of posts, and so by design the original column was narrow to fit that content. We're going to turn that off by telling that we don't want to inherit this default layout from the theme anymore. And you can see already that this has expanded quite a bit of the view here. In fact, maybe it's made it a little bit too wide, so we're going to constrain the width, but we're just going to set it to 1,000 pixels this time. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's also switch off the defaults for the other settings on this block so we can customize it more freely. The first thing I'd like to do is cut down on the number of posts that are displaying here. This seems like a lot. So let's click in the settings for this block, and let's change the number of items displayed on the page from 10 to 4. That looks pretty good. You can see this change is reflected right away. Another thing I'd like to do here is I'd like to change the titles here and make them just a little bit smaller. They just seem too big for me overall, so let's try a preset. This one seems a bit too small. Let's go ahead and set a custom one instead. Let's try 40 pixels. Still a little bit too large, 35. That seems about right. I like that it's making the titles small enough that for the most part they fit in a single line. While we're here, let's also make a few more changes. There's a read more link here, and I'd like to customize that to say continue reading. And let's also make it bold so that it stands out a little bit. I also want to simplify things a little bit in the post meta, so the first thing I'd like to do is just remove the author line. I'm the only author on this site, so I don't think I really need to show that. Also, we have some post terms here, or tags, and I feel like these clutter it up a bit too, so let's go ahead and delete those as well. Okay, this blog feed is looking good. One more change I'd like to make here is to add a section above this post list so that I can feature my most recent blog post at full width. To do that, I'm going to click on the query loop block in the list view again, and in the floating menu, I'm going to choose the option to insert a new block before this one. On the right, I'm going to click the plus icon, and I'm going to look for another query loop block. When you first add the block, you can see that it fills out with your blog post right away. And also we're presented with the option to try a few different layouts. This one has a nice large image. Let's see if there's others. That seems good, but I really like the large image, so let's go ahead and start with that. Immediately I can see that we're loading more blog posts than I want, so let's go back up to the settings for this block and let's change the number of posts that are shown from 3 to 1. And then when we scroll down, we can see that this section is just sitting above our other feed of blog posts. While I'm here, I'm going to click on the query loop again, and I'm going to constrain the width of this block similar to the one below it, just so that they line up a little bit better. And you can see that they keep that same width all the way through. Another change I want to make here, I'd like to take this post title and I'd like to move it below the image. So to do that, I'm going to click on the controls here and I'm just going to move it down one. And you can see now that it's just below the image instead of above it where it was. Also, I'd like to make this one a little bit bigger. Let's try for a custom size again. I'm going to try 50 pixels. Actually, I think it looks a little better here at 60 pixels. Another change I'm going to make here is I'm going to change the read more link to say continue reading, and I'm also going to bold it to carry the same theme that I'm doing in the posts below. Since this is my most recent post, I don't think I need to show the date for this particular one, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And you can see this has cleaned up the view quite a bit. One thing I'm noticing is that these sections seem too close together. So I think it would be a good idea to click on the query loop, and again we're going to add another block above it, and this time we're going to add a spacer block. I'm going to go ahead and search for that. And let's make it just a little bit taller to create a bit more separation. I'm going to click out of there so we can see it a little bit better. That looks pretty good. One last thing, I can see that the blog post is repeated twice. We show the first one at the top and then it shows up again in the feed. One nice thing about the query loop is we can prevent this. And to do that, let's click on it in the sidebar. And then here in the settings, you can see we have this option called offset. And I'm going to change this from 0 to 1. And to explain what this does, it basically tells the block, I want you to show a feed of all my blog posts, but before you show that, just skip the first one and show every post after that. And that's exactly what it's done here. You can see that the duplicate post is removed, so it's just shown above now. And when we publish a new blog post, it'll be the one that shows up here at the top, and then it'll kick that one down below to this feed of blog posts we have below it. I'm feeling pretty good about this layout, but before I save my changes, I'm going to preview quickly. And this allows me to see how the design is going to look when it's on a tablet and on a smartphone. And you can see on a smartphone it actually scales really nicely. Everything goes back to a single column view. A two-column view here would just feel too crowded. So let's go ahead and save this template. You can see we've made a few changes here, and that's fine. We're going to confirm those and save. Now let's take a look at our site. If we go here to our site, you can see that this is our theme, and this is live on WordPress right now. So you can see that we've got our big header at the top. Everything that follows through here keeps the same width that we had hoped to maintain all the way through. And really, it's done a good job of what my primary goal here was, which was to show my photography a lot larger than it is currently. Another thing that's really interesting is if I click on other pages here, like the About page, for example, you see that those pages, they use our minimized header, our smaller header that we set up originally. And that is true whether you click on any of the pages on the site. When you go back to the home page, though, you have this tall header that we set up. Again, showing that if you edit the template part for the header, that's going to make a change that's going to affect a whole bunch of different parts of the site that use that template part. But here on the home page, because we edited the index template directly, we have a custom header just on this page, and that's going to welcome new visitors to our site. And if we compare that with the existing site we started with, you can see that this is really a dramatic change. That the photography here just seems so much smaller and cramped compared to the site that we've just set up. And this really seems like a site that we're going to be able to work with for some years ahead. And even now, this is just getting started, so we could customize it further. I think it's also useful to compare this to our demo site. So if we look at the demo for the theme that we're using, Geologist, you can see that it has this very simple layout with the cream colored background and a single column. And yet, just in the period of time that we've been working here, we've managed to take that look as our starting point and instead turn it into something that's completely custom. And that's pretty amazing because I did it without any code. I didn't require a designer or any special help at all. Everything just happened here inside of the full site editor.
Okay, and yeah, that's the end of the presentation that we have prepared for you today. And we are going to start with the questions. And just give me a second. I'm going to change screens again so I can share a new site. And I'm going to check what questions we have. Since we have many questions going around, so I'm going to try to reply to some of them. And mostly I've been checking some of the questions and some of them are almost the same. So I'm going to try to sort of merge them together and provide a single answer for those questions that are kind of similar. Okay, and my camera is freezing a bit and I'm not sure why. I'm sorry about that. Let's hope it doesn't last. So I'm going to bring the questions here. Adam says, if you can explain the difference between templates and template parts in the editor Veda and how to use them correctly. Probably you asked this question before I was actually explaining that, but it's okay because I know this is a very confusing part. And one of the things to take into account is that they are different depending on what you're trying to achieve. So for example, you're seeing my screen right now, and if I go to the editor, and the best way to go there is by going to Appearance and then to the editor, and then you are sort of, we're going to wait for it to load, so Let's wait for a moment. Okay, so this is a test site. It's not the same test site that my colleague was using. And here I'm thrown into this homepage template, but I'm going to browse all my templates. Okay, so there was an option to browse all your templates, or you can also use the WordPress icon here at the top. And you're going to see that you have a section for templates and for template parts. Basically, the difference is that a template part can be used in several templates. So for example, your footer can be used in different templates, in your homepage template, in your index template, in your page template, and any other custom template that you have there. And if you want to change something in that template part, let's say the footer credit, and you want that change to apply everywhere else where that template part is being used, then in that situation, I suggest going to the template parts and using the footer template part that you are using. Now, this is a test site and it doesn't have that much content, but you would go to the footer area and then maybe change the content here, and maybe instead of saying proudly powered by WordPress, maybe you would just leave it like that, and that's going to affect all the pages where a template with this template part is being used. And if you are using, if you want to edit something that is very specific to a template, and I'm going to go again because I just left that accidentally. If I go into the editor again, and let's wait for the editor to load again. I mentioned that there are two ways to get there to the little sidebar that we had on the left. That one is by going to the option that says browse all templates, or you can also click here on the WordPress icon here at the top, and you can navigate between template and template parts. So if you want to edit a specific template, let's say a single post template, and you would go, this is a template that, for example, is used in your individual posts. So you can go to that template, edit whatever content you want in that template, and it's going to affect only that template, and the other templates won't be affected at all. Okay. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little bit hard to explain, and in the presentation, the examples we had there were probably a little bit better than my examples right now, where we changed the logo and then we changed the content inside the index template. Hopefully those were clear. Okay, let's go with the next question. Kevin asks, though my site is not optimal, it is very stable. It is the first version and theme that I ever had. I'm so afraid to make changes and its downstream effects on historical posts. Please comfort this feeling. And yeah, I totally understand you, Kevin. And there are actually a couple of questions that are similar to Kevin's one. And I think the approach that we show in the webinar is the answer to your question. Instead of experimenting and changing things on your site where probably you have too much information, and like you said, historical posts that maybe go for many years and you don't want to sort of mess them up, I would suggest exporting the content, and you create a new site. That new site doesn't have to have any paid plan. It can be a free plan. You use that to, you import that into a free site, and then you can experiment over there, and you will be able to check how your site would look if you were to change it or edit it with a block theme. Because to experiment with full site editing, you need to activate a block theme. So on the new imported site, you would actually be playing and modifying and testing and getting familiar with full site editing before you decide to do it on your current site. Okay, Paul asks, is there a blog theme that is good for blogging news sites with lots of headlines posts on the front page? There was a similar question along the questions that we had here, like what theme do you recommend, like for writers, and maybe some other topics as well. And I think explanation relies on one of the first slides that we were explaining at the beginning, and that's that blog themes are mostly like your starting point. So when you actually search for blog themes, and I'm going to show you again just in case, oops, just 1 second, we are going to reload this thing. It seems that with Zoom, it makes things a little bit slower on my end. So that's also an explanation why I'm having this issue of loading things and my camera freezing a little bit. And it adds that I have all the demos that that were prepared by my colleagues. So probably too many things open right now. Sorry about that. So we are going to go to themes so you can check this. And as I said before, there's a filter that is called full site editing, and that lets you search for your blog themes. And you're going to see that most of these themes are quite maybe minimal, like for example, let's check, or well, 22. It's a very minimal theme right now. Like you can see, it only has some content and some images, and that's it. But this is just your starting point. So even though we have, there's a few group of blog themes right now, this doesn't mean that if you choose this theme, you won't be able to customize it to what you want. So you start from this template as a starting point, and then you are able to create in your templates, you are able to add all the headlines, all the posts, and with my colleagues, with Jerry's demo that we were actually checking when he was showing the query loop blog, you could actually see there, you could actually see there that you were able to use this query loop blog and to use it as many times. Like he did it to show a big featured image at the top, and then he had the same query loop blog below that showing other blog posts, and you could still be using more query loop blogs and categorize them, maybe use them by categories. And that's something very characteristic in a news website, for example, that you have all these news on a single page, and probably you want to sort of divide them. Like maybe at the top you want to show some featured news, then you want to show a section where you have news that belong to sports, for example, and then you want to have a section where you have posts that belong to fashion, let's say. And then what you would do, you would use 3 query loop blocks, and the top one would show the featured one with a big image. The second one, a query loop block, would be categorized with a specific category that you would use in your post, and the same you would do with your other query loop that follows there. So what I'm trying to tell you, Paul, is that it doesn't matter which blog theme you choose, because at the end you will be able to choose, you will be able to customize it in the templates and just achieve the design that you're looking to use. Okay. Janice asks, is full site editing available with basic free WordPress? Yes, it is. You only have to search for blog themes, and that's it. You can use any of the free blog themes that we have there. And it's available, just to remind you that it's available on all WordPress.com plans, including free. And that might sound a little bit redundant, but I just want to make sure that that is clear. We have a question from Jane. Will the blog themes and full site editing work with the Woocommerce plugin in e-commerce? And there were similar questions about this. And we are currently working on that and working on that integration. So with next versions, I'm pretty sure that that's going to become, that's going to be even better. But right now, you still can do it, because you can actually, in the way you work with full site, in the same way you work with full site editing, you probably notice that you are still working with blocks. And with blocks, within blocks, you have a section of WooCommerce blocks. So you can still create your templates, for example, and inside of those pages still add blocks that are related to WooCommerce. So that's what you can do at the moment. In the future, this might be even better. Like probably will be able to customize your cart page, your checkout page, and have a page template only for those pages. So that's going to be integrated into the future, but right now you can already start building some basic layouts with WooCommerce blog and using these themes. Okay, Christine asks, is full site editing, it's actually the same question. So since I already answered that, so that one is on, okay. Kevin asks, and I think this one is related, and I was marking the questions because we got so many questions. I saw many of them that were the same question, but I was actually checking at them. Probably I marked them twice. And this is actually about playing in a development mode. And we said that the best way to do that is by exporting your content and adding it into a new site, and that new site that can be private, so nobody gets to see it. You will be able to test and play with full site editing without interfering your live site. Okay, and Tiffany's asked question was about like a theme for writers and rather than photographers, because I know we actually demo this site with those beautiful images. But yeah, instead of using images, you can just use your blog post and no need to show any images at all or any visuals at all. So you can just build the same blogs and the same templates just with using your posts. Okay. And some questions I think I've already answered. Diva asks for business plans. I'm assuming one of the new things we would use would be our current custom theme. I don't have to rebuild from scratch. If you chose a blog theme, yeah, and then yes, if you're already on a blog theme, you don't have to rebuild it because this feature has been there for business sites, for example, for some time already. So if you're already using a blog theme, yes, you don't have to rebuild it. You can just continue using full site editing. And it might be the case also that you've been just building your site with your pages and posts and you haven't tamper yet into the templates. You can definitely start tampering inside the templates and just checking what options you have there. But yes, you can definitely just use the same blog theme. Okay, so how do I add a menu? I'm going to try to show this very quickly because we have still many questions and there are many things that I would like to show. That, for example, if you go inside your editor here, and let's wait for it to load. Okay, and you will see here that the best way, and that's something that we've shown in the demo as well, is to have the list view open. That way you can see where you are. Because if you, I know it's quite intuitive to start just clicking on things, but sometimes you don't know if you are inside a header area, if you're editing a header template part. So it's better to just, you know, in this situation, I'm inside this section here, okay? And okay, so I'm inside this template and I'm clicking here and it says header rounded logo. And that's actually something very nice to check because you have the name of the template part. And it might be that you had another template part that is called header center. For example, I think we have in this website a header that is called header center. But in this template specifically, I'm using a header template area that is called header rounded logo. For some reason, it's just a test site. And you can see here that we have a navigation and we added a navigation. And if not, you can just type navigation and that's going to add the navigation block. And when you see that, you're going to see that you have actually the option to add. And that's going, and then you can start choosing what you want to add there. And I have a contact page, so I'm going to add a contact page here. Okay, and okay, and then I keep getting this icon to add a new blog, and I'm going to search if I have another page. I think I have a home one here. Yes, there's a home page, so I'm adding a home page, and I keep adding menu items. So that's the way to start a menu. If you already have a menu, you can just choose one of the menus that you already have. But if you don't have a menu yet, then you can start just adding here or your pages that you want to show in your menu. That means that you probably want to create those pages first and then create a menu, because right now we are only going to see the list of the pages that you have created or the posts that you have created. Then one thing very interesting here is that in this site navigation menu, you can add other elements that before full site editing you weren't able to do that. Like maybe you can add a search option inside the menu. Like we've seen some people asking, like, I really want to add a search option next to my menu. And you can still keep adding more elements, like for example social icons. Like maybe you can add your Facebook on your Twitter and just keep adding. Well, you need to add here your Facebook profile or your Facebook profile page, right? So that's how you customize and add your menu here. And you can just organize things like moving maybe home to the beginning of the navigation menu. And that's going to be shown inside this template part called header rounded logo. Okay, let's check another question very quickly because we only have a few minutes left. And Jane's question is about getting a copy. I think it's the same question about playing with full site editing without creating or modifying the current site. So we already know the answer to that. And well, I'm going to try to answer this question right now. Yes, although it might be, I'm going to try to do it quickly, but it's a very interesting question. I like to have a sidebar along with a header and footer on every page of my site. The homepage content would be a grid of image and titles and links to my post. How would I do that? So adding sidebars. Yeah, that's very interesting because in most of these blog themes, you will notice that there are no sidebars, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that. So let's say this is the template that I'm going to modify. Okay, so I have here already, I have my header area, and then I have a group here where I have some content with, it's actually a lot of content going on there. So the best way right now is that we are going to add above, in between the header area and the content that I have here, I'm going to insert a space because I want to be able to add a block in between those two. So I'm going to insert before, and I'm going to add columns, a block called columns. Okay, I'm going to move this around, columns. And the best one for a sidebar can be this one, 70-30. This is wider and the sidebar is showing to this point, to this right side and in a narrower width. So I'm going to choose that one. And inside this one, I can start by maybe, I'm going to start adding a heading. And I don't know, maybe that's going to be a section where we have our posts. So I'm going to type our posts. Okay, so, and what I'm trying to do right now is now going to grab all the content that I have there below the columns block and place it in this column that is wider. Okay, so there's one column here and there's one column here. So I'm going to grab this one and I'm going to drop it there. And yeah, now it's getting there. So first time didn't work, second time it did. Okay, so I still have, so that's why the list view is very important, because I can see first column is this one. Okay, so we have all the content placed there. Okay, and we didn't have the need to sort of rebuild it, so it's there. And second column is this one. So you can start adding here. I don't know, I think you had some specifics for your sidebar, but the thing would be just adding all the posts that you need here. Like I'm adding a social links icon here, like very quickly. And then I can start adding others. Maybe I can start adding other content here, like, I don't know, calendar. It's just an idea of what you can get there. And then you would start building your sidebar with all the elements that you need on your sidebar. And that's going to be inside this page template. Okay, so that's like a very easy way to create a sidebar and inside a template, and in this case, in a home page template. Okay, so yeah, we are already at the top of the hour, and I hope that was helpful. And I had an initial request at the beginning asking for us to leave the chat on the Q&A open after the webinar ends for a few minutes so that you are able to copy that. So I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to thank everybody for staying here. And I hope this was helpful. I'm going to leave this session open for a few minutes more, and hopefully we will see you in a next webinar. Thank you so much.